Welcome everybody. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share this case with you. I'm going to just give you an outline of what we're going to be doing. I'm going to mention briefly how I came to Sandplay. Then we're going to look at the case of Philip, who over an 18-month period did 34 Sandplay pictures and several drawings. I will illustrate and discuss the first 3 trays, then move to the middle period of treatment, and then the impact of 9/11 on the work. I'll discuss how I realized, also how did I realize that closure was beginning to happen. Then I'm going to talk about the imagery transformation class in my art therapy degree, which led to my becoming a sculptor. And of course, I revere Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth, 2 British artists. And when I talk about the working in the sculpture, it was like building a relationship with a stone, like I do with a client. And then I will save the rest till the end. And now I'd like to start with the actual presentation. And so these 3 pictures are the 3 images that are really, for me, captured what Philip was trying to symbolize. In the middle we have Hampton Court, which is the home of Henry VIII. On the left we have a miniature of a little boy wearing an orange jacket, which he became identified with. And on the right we have this miniature that he became attached to and called the Flame Man. So this is a young man's maturing process in the temenos of Sandplay. And temenos means a holding space, a sacred space, really. And now I want to say a little bit about Sandplay. For those of you who are not familiar with Sandplay, Sandplay was discovered, really. Dora Kauf was in analysis with Jung. And Jung sent her to England to study with Margaret Lowenfeld, a psychologist who was also a play therapist and did research on child development. And then Dora Kauf went back to Switzerland and then went to Japan and studied with Suzuki, and she reduced the size of the tray. So in this theory, the therapists hold a space, the environment holds a space, and then the tray is the dimension of the human body and also your field of vision. So there's all this containing going on. And what you do is you invite the person to look around the room. There are all these miniatures, and to create a story. And that's exactly what I did with this young boy. I didn't give any directions. I just invited him to play. So here's a little guide for the sort of symbolic interpretation of the spatial phenomena. So as you can see, in the center is the ego of the person. The right-hand side is the conscious, the left is the most unconscious. Upper right is considered often the personal father, or the person's relationship to their profession. Lower right is the relationship to the personal mother. And in some ways it's interesting because I was always sitting on the lower right of the tray. So we might be thinking in terms of transference, countertransference. And this is sort of the area of the instincts, and what you're looking to see, that the energy moves from the lower left to the upper right. And this is meant to be the area of the sort of spiritual resources. But I don't want to get this too complex. I want to just invite you to really live into the pictures as I go through the trays. And I'm not going to give much of an introduction, because this is exactly what happened. Mother called, made an appointment, and I stressed that I like to do an intake with the parents first and then meet the child. Well, lo and behold, the doorbell rang, and I anticipated meeting two professional parents coming to give me a history of their child's problem prior to meeting their son. Instead, two adults and a child were looking nervously at me as I opened the door. And perhaps the parents were wondering, what is behind this office door? What did Sandplay therapy mean? How might this address their 6-year-old's needs? Their initial moments made me think how urgent their needs must have been. They hadn't waited, as we agreed, to bring Philip on his own after I had met with them. The mother admitted that she had heard me say that I always meet with the parent first. I wondered what they had told their son. I thought quickly and realized that I had to invite Philip into the Sandplay room, and I showed him the miniatures. I handed the parents my own initial intake form to fill out in the waiting room while Philip and I started our journey. I looked at Philip's large, questioning brown eyes that met mine under his New York Yankees baseball cap. His full, chipmunk-like cheeks and slightly open mouth caught my attention. His mother had told me over the phone that Philip had anger issues. He had rage attacks towards her. She and her husband thought these needed to be addressed. This is all I knew about this child. So just taking a minute to look at this and just see, sort of, before I describe what's where and how, what comes to you. And I will, just since I mentioned it, here is Hampton Court, and here on the lower left corner is the Flame Man. Philip immediately started to look around the room and select miniatures for his picture. He worked very quickly in the wet tray and appeared very invested in the process. I sat on the lower right side of the tray and felt I was in awe of how he seemed to know exactly which miniature he needed and where to place them. So in this first tray, you will notice on the lower right left-hand side there is the Flame Man. And I have some details that I want to show you. Whoops. So here is the Flame Man. And we'll just go back up here. So as the other thing I want to point out is that in the middle of the tray, underneath the teepee, there's a mother, a Native American mother and child holding a baby. And down here on the lower right is the partner, as it were, of that person. What is of interest over here on the right, it's hard to see, but there's a turned over stretcher, possible indication of injury. And then here there's a woman, somebody paddling their own canoe. When I undid the tray, in this area where the canoeist is and the injured man on the stretcher, I saw this dinosaur. In the center of the tray, next to the teepee, there is a crocodile. And in front of the teepee, there's another dinosaur. And here on the lower left, we have the Flame Man and Hampton Court. All that Philip said to me about this, the dinosaur met a king. The Indians, they're having great battle. I'll go back to the sort of initial one. So there's a lot of, there are cowboys and Indians and battle. They're having a great battle. My experience of the tray was as if I was watching 15 films fast-forwarding, arousing a remarkable sense of chaos. It was as if Philip's psyche was warding off danger, warring states, primitive instincts, and longings for shelter and protection. I tried to comprehend what this may indicate about Philip's ego development. And here is a picture of the Native American woman with her baby in the papoose, and the husband or father of the child that I showed in the lower right-hand side of the miniature. And here's Hampton Court, and here's another image of the little boy. So here, Philip arrived for the second session, bringing this, this large figure of the scuba diver, which he called Max, the superhero. He told me that Max got wet. When Max got wet, you could see his lungs. Philip picked up a jet. He explained that the jet hit the flame man. There was a mid-air collision, and Max held the flame man's hand. Philip continued and stated that the evil fire guy was coming and burning everything. The superhero Max came and buried the flame man and put water on him, so he melted. After Philip left, I uncovered the tray, and I will show you. Here is the flame man. Just want to go back to here. So on the lower left, Philip has placed the castle of, here we have Hampton Court again. And here on the lower left we have the fenced-in old man with a horse and cart. And in the right-hand corner we have a skateboard. And directly in front of where Philip stood, he placed the boy with the yellow t-shirt. And I think you can, it's probably hard to see that. He is lying down, and Philip became identified with this figure. On the right, there was also a figure of a farmer plunging a shovel into the ground. Did this figure indicate Philip's call to do the work? Did the superhero Max imply his longing for his father to be there with him? He then moved to the wet tray. So here is the flame man who's being dissolved. And I think it's interesting to note that he's already divided the tray into areas, and there's an indication of a possible bridging right there with the bridge. So he goes right over to the wet tray, and he made these 3 towers that looked like fingers, like Mother Earth coming up. His own resourceful handmade structures are firm. I also wondered, were these the 3 children in the family? He gave me a beaming smile as he completed the tray and asked whether I had anything to eat. We went to the kitchen and got a box of cereal. He confidently sat at the dining room table and almost inhaled the food. I thought, what clearer metaphor could he have used to show how starved and undernourished a part of him felt? So having a bowl of cereal became an integral part of Philip's treatment. Every week after he'd completed an activity, a sand tray, a drawing, or a game, he would state that he was hungry, and we'd go to the kitchen and get cereal and a juice box. In order to make this ritual more significant, I would light a candle as he sat down opposite me, devouring his cereal. When he finished, I would snuff the candle. Philip, and I think as I showed you, on the lower left we have this horse and cart and indications of needing nourishment. I later learned that Philip's mother was one of 14 children, and there had never been enough food in his home, or her home rather, to feed them all. Did Philip also carry his mother's shadow need for her childhood, from her childhood to be nourished? In my countertransference, I felt very comfortable with requests for food and his eagerness to explore my apartment. I was reminded of Dora Kauf, the mother, as it were, of Sandplay, stating how she would allow the children she worked with to investigate a home as they were really seeking hidden treasures in themselves. And now we'll move forward to the third tray. And again, just have a sense, it's becoming more organized. There's a sort of, for me, a calmer feeling to it. Philip arrived with his mother. She left him at my front door to return at the end of the session. I was relieved that we had the whole space to ourselves and we could continue Philip's nourishing cereal ritual if needed. I was concerned that if his mother sat in the waiting area, since my living room opened into the dining area, her presence would break what Dora Kauf posits is that temenos, that receptive container in which deep emotions and expressions of fantasy have a chance to manifest themselves and be received, appreciated, and understood. In my countertransference, I wanted to hold and contain the space to meet Philip's needs, whether they were in the Sandplay room or elsewhere in my home. Wearing his hat, Philip started his picture by placing 3 aeroplanes in a line facing the upper right corner. Below that, he placed the old man with his horse and cart. This miniature has been moved from his second picture, where it appeared fenced in at the lower left. So it's moved to the upper right, and that sort of indication that I talked about to the direction of movement. 3 battleships lined up below it, and a tree separated this part of the picture from the rest of the tray. Houses appear, and there's a bridge on the left of the tree. Another house stands with a person on either side. In the corner of the tray are 2 shovels, a tree, and 2 cars sitting side by side. To the left is a house with people in front of it, and the blonde boy, the image that Philip becomes identified, on the other side of the house. In the lower left corner, there's another house with a woman with a basket. Again, indications possibly of food and nourishment. Above this house and in the left corner is an evergreen tree. To the right of the tree is a house, and behind it is a witch holding a red apple, and it's hard to see. Philip stated, "This is the gingerbread house with the witch picking apples." The lid of this house comes off, and Philip placed 4 crystal beads and a shell inside the house. Again, I noticed the number 3. 3 ships, 3 aeroplanes, 3 sandcastles in the previous tray. What might be needed to emphasize? Might this number infer 3 children in the family? And as you can see, the tray appeared to be organized and separated into different areas of activity. So now we've seen the first 3 trays, and I have a meeting with the parents. And because until this time I had no idea what the real, I didn't know any more of Philip's background. I have to pause this, I've made a mess here. So anyway, when I met with the parents, they were just amazed and asked me what had I done. And I said that I hadn't done anything, that really I had just followed the lead of what your child's sort of indications were. And so the parents agreed to continue treatment. So now I'm going to fast forward to the middle of the treatment of Philip's journey into the world. Now we're 3 months later. Philip came up in the elevator on his own and arrived with a candy for me. I received it with joy. He asked to draw and did a picture of himself and his 2 sisters. He said there was not enough room in the picture to indicate his parents. He then asked to play snakes and ladders, and he won, and he said he wanted to play cootie, which is a game like the potato head man. He said the cootie bugs were playing and jumping all over each other. He then went to the tray and he placed this dark castle in the upper right-hand corner, another castle next to it, Hampton Court, which appeared in the first and second trays, and he added a fourth building next to it. He laid an African-American woman and a blonde man down and a lady in a blue dress. We see them in the middle. He took out a speedboat and placed a figure he identified as the king in it. Here we are. He added another person in the yellow boat on the left. In the center, 3 children were lying down under an umbrella. An African-American boy was placed slightly to the left of the 3 children. Philip placed the boy with the orange shirt to the left of the 3 children. Philip placed the boy with the orange shirt, a symbol of himself, on the skateboard, slightly to the left of the center. He said, there are men in the boat. The people, they are lying down. He had his snack, and I escorted him to the elevator. He entered the elevator and gave me a beaming smile as he waved to me from the elevator window. When I went back to look at the drawing, you see this looks like a sort of axe shape in the background of the drawing of the 3 children. And when I looked more closely, I realized that none of the figures had noses or hands. Philip's comment that he couldn't fit his parents in the drawing seemed like a metaphor for the children feeling unprotected by their parents. When I looked at his tray, I also wondered whether the 3 adults that lay down in this tray indicated that they had lost their power. Experiencing Philip's excitement leaving the office on his own was a joyous moment for both of us. Philip was demonstrating a greater sense of agency, enhanced ego strength, and self-assertion. Four months on, I met with Philip's mother. His mother was teary-eyed as she acknowledged how well Philip was doing. One of her sisters had remarked on a huge change in Philip's behavior. She noticed that he seemed calmer, more sure of himself. She spoke of sibling rivalry and how Philip's older sister used to tease him and saying that he was going to see his girlfriend. Well, Philip was getting more attention because now he had his own room and he was traveling in the elevator on his own. He appeared to be feeling more seen and empowered. His mother was pleased that I had brought the breathing question to her attention, because I said, I just noticed that Philip breathes through his mouth. And she said it was something that she had meant to address. And I recalled, Philip drew faces without noses. His mother told me that the family would be away for the summer. After this meeting, I was so heartened to hear that Philip's mother and family had experienced the change in his behavior. I surmised that as the flame man had now disappeared from his Sandplay, it may indicate that Philip was now able to express his feelings and had started to integrate and transform his narcissistic rage. And now this is the tray that Philip did 2 days after 9/11. After a 2-month break over the summer, Philip returned for treatment. He came to see me on September 13th and asked me whether I knew about the Twin Towers. I asked him to tell me about it. They were hit by 2 planes and they fell down, he said. I told my mom, but she already knew, he added. He looked a little bewildered and then moved towards the sand tray and made this scene. Philip proceeded to place knights jousting, Native Americans, and the man on the stretcher is on the upper right-hand corner. And sadly, it's very difficult to see. But again, we've seen the wounding before. He filled the tray with miniatures. There was a Native American woman, though here we are, right in the front. At the edge here. She appeared to be paddling her own canoe, and she had appeared in the first tray. He told me that the picture was about all kinds of armies. As I witnessed Philip's making this tray, I was reminded of his first session when he filled the tray. Again, I'm just going to show this sort of sense of being, as I put it, overwhelmed. As if his psyche was overwhelmed and that he was seeking expression and containment in the tray. Battle scenes became the theme of his sessions for the next month. Everyone, as you know, was traumatized by the World Trade disaster and felt warring factors in their psyche. Feelings of vulnerability and uncertainty was the zeitgeist of the time, and Philip expressed this. Was Philip using the tree to contain all these conflicting energies? Little did he know that I went straight to the Sandplay to ground myself after I heard about the Twin Tower disaster. And when I looked back at what I created, it was like, in the wet tray, it was like Lower Manhattan, just the sort of image of it. So Philip appeared so relieved that I listened to him tell me about the World Trade disaster. And like his mother, it emphasized for me the importance for a child to feel received, listened to, and heard. And something else that comes to me as I look at this, I'm thinking, can we see the wood for the trees? And also, trees can be symbolic of a lot of new energy and growth. So there's a lot going on here. And now I'm just going to leave you with this, because I'm going to fast forward now till the 27th session in January of 2002. It was a few weeks since Philip had come to his session. He'd been sick after the Christmas and New Year holiday. He arrived and stated that he didn't know what he wanted to do. And I said that was fine. So he had his snack, and then he wanted to teach me how to play tic-tac-toe. We played several games, and he always won to his delight. He then wanted me to guess what he was drawing. He drew Harry Potter and another half figure. And then it was time to end the session, and he took the picture with him. As you know, Harry Potter is the story of a boy who has lost both parents. Might his drawing symbolize his relationship with his parents, his experience of their absence in his life? I felt he was different at this time, more grown up and more sure of himself. He didn't play in the sand. I was sensing so much change in him and indications of him near the end of his treatment. I realized that it would be his birthday the next day. He would be a year older than when we had started. So Philip arrived a week later and informed me that Sandplay was for babies. He wanted to play a game. He had his ritual snack, and the rest of the session he taught me hangman. He was ill the following week, and when he returned on February 21st, his first question is the book ready? He knew that I photographed each of his trays and would be compiling them into a book for him, and I would give him the book when our work was completed. What stronger clue did I need that he was preparing for termination? I reassured him that I was preparing his book. The next week, again, he told me he wanted to draw. He drew himself and said that he wanted to give this picture to his mother to say that he was sorry for his behavior. And as you know, one of the presenting problems had been his lack of respect for his mother. This seemed a huge change of awareness on his part. He was taking responsibility for his action, I thought. He was delighted with his gift for his mother. Philip appeared to no longer need the nurturing experience of playing in the sand, Mother Earth. And we never discussed his relationship with his mother, which I also found just extraordinarily wonderful, that he came to it on his own. The following week, Philip arrived excited to tell me he was going away to visit a cousin who was the same age as him. He would be away for 2 weeks. He played snakes and ladders, and he said that he would give me extra chances to win. I assured him that he didn't have to take care of me, and I thanked him. When he landed on number 80 on the board, there are 100 spaces on it, he told me that his grandfather was 119 years old and his grandmother was 80. I was amused and enchanted by these comments. He had his snack and left with an Easter gift from me of 7 little chocolate bunnies. He was jumping for joy and excited that his father was picking him up. I met with Philip's parents, and then, I met with Philip, and he told me that he wanted his mother to come up with him and wait for him in the waiting room. Philip was dressed in camouflage clothes. I noted the change in his relationship with his mother. We played games. He won continually, much to his delight. Following the week, we'll move to April 12th. This is his 32nd session. The previous week, Philip had brought me a copy of his favorite book, Lemony Snicket, which I read to him. He then wanted to draw, and he did what I consider a self-portrait. And then he told me that he hadn't eaten for hours. I assured him that he could always have a snack. So he ate greedily. We played snake and ladders, and he left energized. So Philip arrived wearing his Yankee hat, and he drew a figure all in blue, surrounded by, can you see that? By short red lines. A large blue sword with red around it, and then the whole figure enclosed in gold and yellow. He was so proud of his drawing and wanted me to include him in the photograph. It was a joyous moment for both of us. I now surmise that his hat showed me his identity with the Yankee team. I no longer thought of it as another form of camouflage or need to hide or protect himself from the world. He is now holding a sword, as if owning the one he had made out of Crayola model magic. The whole figure appears to be radiating energy and golden light. Philip felt empowered. And I'm sorry that it's hard to see the yellow. Philip arrived and wanted to draw. He drew a boy wearing a crown with a blue sword surrounded by red. I imagined again it was a self-portrait. He enclosed himself with a strong green color. To the right of him he drew a figure which he told me was dead. He added that his sisters no longer bothered him. He then asked if it was time for him to leave. I told him we still had a little time. He was restless. He told me he was going to Boston the next day and was excited to be going to a game. As I looked at his drawing, I thought to myself, Philip has slain his dragon. He has become the king who he mentioned in his first Sandplay picture. On closer observation, I noticed that for the first time he had included a nose as well as both hands in this figure. With excitement, I called his parents the next day and asked how they found Philip. Some weeks before, we had discussed Philip terminating when the school year ended for him at the end of June. I stated that I felt Philip had completed his process and that he should come for one more session. They were delighted, as was I. We were all seeing the same growth. So Philip arrived, this is his last 38th session. Philip arrived with a photo of himself. It read on the back, "Thank you, Liz." I gave him his book of photos of his Sandplay process, including the final drawings. He looked through the pictures with me. He then decided to glue the photo of himself on the outside cover of the book. After that, we sat and celebrated his work by having his favorite ice cream. I handed him a toy car with a spanner so he could change the wheels, a little metaphor of empowering change and movement. He was jumping for joy, and as he was about to leave, he ran back into the Sandplay room and did his final tray. He made a sandcastle in the center left side of the tray, placed the blonde boy wearing an orange shirt on the top with a red umbrella. He wrote his name in the tray and bounded out the door and down in the elevator to meet his father. As I sort of look back on Philip's process reflects his moving through different stages of development. Philip may have experienced his father as passive and absent because of his type of work, but his relationship with his father had strengthened, and his father had been able to spend more time with them. When I looked, I also reflected on, did Philip carry the family the myth that you can't deal with feelings? Both his parents solved their problems by using their thinking function. The flame man, a symbol of Philip's burning rage, was transformed. As Philip learned to express his feelings in a safe and contained manner, he became the ruler of his passions. So in conclusion, this case illustrates the unfolding and healing process of an 8-year-old boy. Philip was aggressive towards his mother, threatening to kill her. He was able to integrate and transform these energies, feeling nourished physically and emotionally through his work and relationship with a therapist in the temenos she created.